Great. Thank you very much, Tom. Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Takamoto. I am co-chair of the Developmental Disabilities Committee of the Arlington Community Services Board. And we welcome everyone to be here today. This is a very important topic. We know that while sometimes folks tell us what angels our children are, sometimes they aren't. And we have some wonderful experts today to give us some overviews on behavioral supports. And to start, LaVoice Reed, who's the Bureau Chief of the Division of Aging and Behavioral and Developmental Services, right? Division of Aging and Developmental Services. We'll start things off. And then I also want to let folks know, I sent it in the update that Bertra McGann, who is co-chair, will not be here today. Her husband recently passed away, and of course she's taking care of that. So at that, LaVoice, do you want to kick off?
I certainly can, and I have a PowerPoint presentation if you can go ahead and pull that up, Sherry. And I also will introduce myself. I am LaVoice Reed. I am the Bureau Director of our Clinical and Developmental Services, which is one of two bureaus in Arlington DHS's Aging and Disability Services Division. And I believe our division director, Maimuna Duncanfield, is also on the call. And if not, she'll be joining us shortly. But just wanted to distinguish between the. Okay. So you can advance to the next slide. Okay. And what I am hoping to do today ahead of our presenters, and thank you, Sherry, for selecting this as a topic. The therapeutic consultation, which I'll explain in just a minute, is one of the probably fewer or lesser known waiver services supporting individuals with behavioral support needs. It also provides consultation around speech and language and some other services as well, but we won't be talking about those today. I wanted to highlight some of the services where behavioral supports are concerned that are available through developmental services, whether someone has a DD Medicaid waiver or someone is on the wait list for services as well. And then also to briefly talk about distinguishing between mental health services and behavioral support services, and to briefly talk about the role of our DD mental health therapists as well. So I'll start off real quickly in talking about behavioral therapeutic consultation. Again, this is a DD Medicaid waiver service that looks at providing behavioral expertise, training, technical assistance to individuals, family members, caregivers, and service providers. And what that actually looks like is starting with conducting an assessment to get an understanding of what the behavioral needs are for the individual, what needs are being served or met by the behavior that we're trying to modify or adjust, understanding that all behavior has a purpose. And with many of the individuals that we support, often that purpose is communicating a need or an unmet need, and that it is often done through behaviors. And so we're really looking at trying to reshape the behaviors as well. It's professional consultation, again, designed to assist individuals, parents, guardians, family members, and other providers of support services. It's embedded in an individual's support plan, their ISP support plan, as well, in terms of having goals and outcomes that are tied directly to the ISP. And on that note, it's also something that is then monitored by the support coordinator. Therapeutic therapeutic consultation will look differently depending on the individual, because again, it's person-centered to that person's needs and their their ISP, the individual support plan. The therapeutic consultation is not really coming in and providing the service per se, but really looking at assessing the behavior and coming up with a plan for those individuals that are supporting the individual. So whether that's a family or other caregiver, they're ultimately writing a behavior support plan, but they're providing that training and technical expertise on implementing the plan. And that's important to really understand because you could have a therapeutic, the BCBD, the therapist or the clinician, social worker, or the BCBA that's typically coming out to support the individual and the family, but it's really important that that family or the caregiver is implementing this plan beyond that 1 hour session or 2 hour session that the professional may have in the home, on really looking to see sustained improvement on that as well, because the consistency of that and that repetition for the individual that you're supporting is very important. Next slide, please.
Hmm. There. Are we good, LaVoice?
Yeah, we are good. So again, the first thing is providing that assessment of understanding the behavior, understanding the purpose and what the behavior is attempting to communicate to others. And I think I talked about that with the previous slide and probably just jumped ahead of myself. And again, reflecting the individual's needs. So we can slide to the next because I think I talked about both of those points as well. I just didn't advance the slide, so my apology. Okay. Behavioral therapeutic consultation is a waiver service, and it's covered by both the community living waiver as well as the family and individual supports waiver. It is not covered under the behavioral, the BI waiver, building independence waiver, excuse me. But the department also provides some limited funding for behavioral supports through the regional projects office, and that is intended for individuals that are on the waiver wait list. So for someone that doesn't have a waiver, there's still resources for accessing support such as therapeutic consultation. And these are typically provided through the CSB, typically under contracts with various providers. And so currently with Arlington County, we contract with Alternative Paths Training School, APTS, to provide behavioral supports for individuals that are on the waiver wait list that are, again, with funding from the Regional Projects Office. In the event, though, I will say that we have someone that doesn't have a waiver and that is not on the waiver wait list, that's definitely still something that you'll want to talk with your support coordinator about, because we may be able to access other funding, local funding, to be able to support someone experiencing behavior challenges that could still benefit from therapeutic consultation. Not wanting the funding to be a reason that a parent or family or caregiver has to just solely or independently manage behavioral issues of the individuals they're supporting. So always reach out to the support coordinator for assistance. Next slide. Here I wanted to talk a little bit about just understanding some of the basic differences between mental health services, and behavioral supports. Because oftentimes, I hear families using these sort of interchangeably, not really understanding the differences between the two. So behavior supports is really looking at antecedents of behavior. What is causing the behavior that you're seeing, that challenging behavior that you're seeing, what you're really trying to understand it. Um, a- and um, and so some common components of behavior when we're looking at behavior is looking at the antecedent. What's going on before the behavior is actually occurring? Then understanding the behavior that's being manifested, and then what are the consequences, outcomes of that. And that can actually be what is positively reinforcing the behavior, um, and what is negatively reinforcing the behavior as well. And so sometimes we can have a challenging behavior, but we're actually doing things that are encouraging that behavior. So where we could be positively reinforcing a negative behavior. as well. And so services such as therapeutic consultation is going to help that parent, that family to understand not just the behavior, but how they might be contributing to or shaping that behavior, that challenging behavior as well. Next slide. So again, more on the behavior supports, antecedent behavior interventions, is really looking at a couple of things. Looking at how can we, one, look at changing the environment. Are there things that are actually happening or occurring in the environment that we can change, eliminate, sort of as a first step? Because if they're, that's easier to just try to reshape the environment, to try to minimize behaviors. Other methods may be in working with the actual person, around some of the communication methods, for example, for that particular person, and how they may be responding to things in their environment as well. So it's giving them, developing a certain skill set on being able to adapt to what is happening in the environment, particularly when we can't change certain things in the behavior. How can we support the individual or support the family, support the caregiver, and changing the response to the behavior? And that can be not just the individual's behavior or their response, but it could be a parent's or caregiver's response as well that might need to be shaped or adjusted. And then other methods may attempt to provide communication methods that take the place of the behavior. So taking away a challenging behavior, replacing it with more positive behavioral messages and communication around the behavior as well, with the goal of the individual not using that challenging behavior. Next slide.
Do you see the slide?
Yes, I see it now. So a little bit on mental health. This is really looking at our emotional, psychological, and social well-being affects how we think, how we feel, how we act, help us determine how we handle stress, and how we relate and get along with other people, how we make choices. And this is for all of us. That's not just for people, or this is not just for people with developmental disabilities. And so managing our mental health is it's important across the board. Um, of doing that. So therapy services specifically, or mental health therapy services specifically, is an approach for treating mental health issues, and diagnoses. So mental health diagnoses referring to those diagnoses that are included in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. Things such as anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder. So really looking at something that is a mental health diagnoses are an issue that is stemming from a mental health diagnosis. And for these, you're seeking the services and supports from a licensed mental health professional, such as a psychologist, a licensed clinical social worker, licensed professional counselors, or other licensed mental health provider. Often with the behavior supports that I mentioned, you're looking at what's a professional referred to as a BCBA, a board certified behavior consultant. And the several of the presenters that you're going to be hearing from today are BCBAs, or their services are provided by or in collaboration with the BCBAs. And so that's the professional that is typically dealing with the behavior supports. And then you're looking at licensed mental health professionals when it comes to mental health services. And again, those are rooted in supporting people around mental health diagnoses that we typically find in the DSM. Next slide. Okay, that might be my last slide, but let me actually, Sherry, if you can go back to the previous slide as well. So one of the two other things that I just wanted to touch on in talking about mental health services, and you may hear some of this as well, it's actually not uncommon for individuals that we support to have a mental health diagnosis, let's say anxiety, for example, and it will manifest in behavior as well. And so you may have to do a dual approach. Sometimes we have people that are supported by our DD mental health therapists that are also receiving therapeutic consultation. So you're sort of doing a two-tier approach in terms of really trying to understand and get at some of the root cause or foundational aspects of that through some of the mental health services, but then looking at some of the behavior supports in terms of how that is actually manifesting. And if you don't understand, or you're seeing a certain behavior or some mental health concerns, we don't have the expectation of you trying to figure that out alone in terms of trying to understand, well, okay, is this a mental health issue? What do I do? Is it a behavior support issue? What do I do? I can't underscore enough the importance of really working with your support coordinator on discussing any concerns that you may have around behavior, around mental health, or just what you're seeing, because they have the expertise and they are aware of the resources and can make referrals for services such as therapeutic consultation, mental health services, and will help you in distinguishing what's what and getting you connected to the right service that's there. One of the things too, and why I'm so appreciative of this particular topic is because so many times our parents and caregivers think that they have to, just experience certain challenging behaviors, and they just really don't know what to do. They don't know that there's help, that there are resources, whether it's in the waiver or local funded, that are actually there. And so this provides just a great opportunity to learn more about that and to hear from some of the experts in the field on some proven techniques as well. But I do encourage anyone that is listening to this presentation live or listening to it in the future, just again to consult with your support coordinator around any concerns that you have. There are services there that are proven effective and are very beneficial for everyone involved. And Sherry, I think, are you doing questions at the end or in the
I'm
chat?
I'm doing questions in the chat if folks have questions, but I do have a couple of topics that you were going to try to cover. One is the REACH crisis services, and the other
Yes.
is the regional. You already talked about the regional project officer for folks on the DD wait list. So yeah, if you can just tell us a little
Yes,
bit
thank
about
you
REACH.
so much. And I'll put that in the PowerPoint. I'll update the PowerPoint presentation to include that. Thank you so much, Sherry. So REACH is the crisis support service for the entire state. When the training centers actually closed, REACH services started our programs just before, but 2014, 2015, I think that was actually prior to my stepping into my role. Um, and I'm going to Google what Reach actually, not Google, but I'm going to look at something because it's not coming off the top of my head what Reach actually stands for. Um, but I'll put that in the chat what it stands for. But they provide crisis support services to individuals with developmental disabilities. They are mobile crisis supports, but they also provide crisis therapeutic homes, and they have a transition home as well in Culpeper. The therapeutic home is located in Woodbridge, Virginia, and it provides some short-term behavioral supports for individuals out of the primary residential setting, continuing to work with the individual alongside with the family. They develop crisis support plans that, again, like a therapeutic consultation plan, would be used with a family member or caregiver and supporting that individual in their natural settings. And so when individuals are experiencing crises, whether they are of a behavioral nature or mental health nature, families are encouraged to reach out to REACH for for support, kind of in the moment support. They're 24/7. So whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, REACH can be contacted for those crisis supports. And again, I'll update the presentation to include that as well. And then the last thing that I mentioned or alluded to is that we do have a full-time developmental services mental health therapist that's under developmental services. And so that person is trained in understanding and developmental individuals with developmental disabilities. In fact, she used to be one of our support coordinators that later became a licensed mental health professional. And so she's been in that role just over 1 year. But we've, for many years, Arlington County has supported this position with, it's a local funded position, recognizing the importance of supporting people with developmental disabilities who also have mental health issues and concern, whether that is a diagnosed mental health disorder or not. So she can do mental health therapy, but she also does a great deal of psychoeducation supports as well.
Great.
And a referral for that person, that position would be made through your support coordinator.
Thank you, LaVoice. And if anyone has questions, we're going to go back and forth in the chat. And thank you so much. LaVoice gave actually had to move around some family celebrations today, so we really appreciate your support always, LaVoice. So the second presentation is Kristen Frigel, who is an MS, BCBA, LBA owner and behavioral analyst, Cora Analyst LLC, and she's going to explain what that is. And she's going to talk on focus on proactive behavioral strategies that incorporate values and compassion into goal development and interventions. And so at that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can.
Thank you, Carrie. I have an updated PowerPoint because I realized my first one that I sent you, some of the stuff didn't download correctly. So I just sent you an updated one if you can grab that most recent email.
Ooh, so this is going to be complicated. Yes, I can if oh shoot. I can if I stop sharing. Let's see here. While I'm pulling up your presentation, would you mind telling, I know at the beginning you tell us a little bit about your presentation. Why don't you go ahead and start there and then I'll catch up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Kristen Frigel. I am a board certified behavior analyst and licensed behavior analyst here in Virginia. I am the owner as well as a practicing consultant in Cora Analysis. And we provide therapeutic consultation services under the DD waiver across the state of Virginia. Mainly, we have providers in Northern Virginia and the Tidewater region of Virginia. My title that I had come up with is a little bit wordy, but proactive behavioral strategies, really the bread and butter is what I'm going to be talking about in the middle, to incorporate values and compassion when we are creating goals and getting into programming. So I could talk about this all day long, but I'm going to be pretty brief today and focus in on one particular area, which is that values incorporation into the goals.
And then, Kristen, if you like, I've also spotlighted you if you want to come on screen so people can see you. And I am doing your slideshow.
There we go. I was having some technical difficulties, so I just switched to my phone last second, but I am here. Thank you. Okay, so starting off with a little bit of, today, and like I like to say, every day's agenda for us practicing in the field. So these 4 things are what we're going to be talking about today, but they are the 4 areas that I hope that that I and my providers, and I hope all behavioral providers, really focus on when we are providing services to our clients. So first and foremost, our goals are to set our clients up for success. And the rest kind of follow under that umbrella. We want to treat our clients with respect. That means we're honoring our clients' values and beliefs, as well as showing our clients compassion and kindness. And some of these seem like common sense, like they should just be obvious and done all the time. But they are so obvious that they're not always implemented when we're doing something like writing a behavior support plan or doing an assessment or providing any other services under the behavioral umbrella there. You can go to the next slide. So first, talking about setting up for success, the question that I always ask is what can we do to ensure our clients are best prepared to have these good days, have an enjoyable life, and continue accessing educational and leisure activities, right? Because the goal of our behavioral services is to assess what barriers are in the way of our client success, and then we're going to determine what we can do to either change the environment, or maybe we need to teach some skills that are going to lead to that increased access, whether it's educational, vocational, leisure activities, self-care, anything that they are trying to access. How can we set them best up for success? So in ABA services or behavioral consultation under therapeutic consultation, this can look like embedding teaching trials throughout a day. It can look like determining preferences, reinforcers, and utilizing them to create motivation for different learning opportunities across the day. When we're talking about environmental strategies, it can look like something as simple as adjusting furniture in an environment, changing around a meal routine or schedule, or sometimes the location of services can make a big difference. Whenever we can provide our clients with more options for choice, that's something that can help as well. So everything that I'm talking about today is going to be all about how are we setting up our clients for success. We're going to we want to get ahead of the issues, right? We want to think about before we have problems, how can we best set them up for success? You go next slide. So getting back to treating with respect, kindness, and compassion. So our goal as behavior analysts, as well as any other providers of behavioral interventions, is to make socially significant changes that directly impact both the clients and their immediate caregivers' lives. Now, this is something important to remember because I like to point out that it's not just the direct client's life that we're trying to make better. We want the caregiver's life, whether that's direct care staff or family or any other caregivers in their immediate life. We want their life to improve as well, because the better that the caregiver's life is supported, then they are going to provide better support for the client's life as well. So we want to begin with that end in mind. How are we going to leave that situation better than we entered it, right? What we also have to remember while aiming to provide this service is that oftentimes what we think is important to target for change is not really a priority in the client or caregiver's life themselves. So we really want to take into mind what is important to them. So how do we determine where to begin, right? When we're trying to figure out what is important to them, we have all kinds of behavioral assessments and fancy analysis strategies as behavior analysts and behavior intervention providers. But when we're looking at the values and compassion side, where do we begin? You can go next slide. So what I like to say, what we try to, where we'd like to start is identifying the values of the individuals that we serve. Once we know what the life they strive for looks like, we can then start to identify the barriers to achievement that have been standing in their way, right? So these are some questions that we always start with asking both the individual, the client that we're serving, as well as the immediate people that are helping care for them in their life. What is important to them, right? First and foremost, what is important to them? What kind of person do they aim to be? How do they want to be described by others? And how do they want to feel about themselves? These are going to be descriptions of the life that they want to lead. They're not going to be a list of achievements. They're not going to be like a to-do list, what they want to do with their life. It's really how they want to feel, how they want to describe their life. So this is going to be a list of descriptions and not something that they want to check off that they do. So that's how we're really defining the values of the individuals we serve. Again, the client as well as everyone that cares for them. Go to the next slide. These are the first 2 pages of an activity that I've done oftentimes with caregivers and staff that work with the individuals we serve, as well as the actual clients themselves. So these are the first 2 pages. I'm going to get to the next 2 in the next slide. But the first page on the left is really talking about what I was just discussing about defining values. So before we even get to the stage of looking at goal development or programming, we want to look at the things that are important to them in life. So these are things that make them feel fulfilled, they provide inspiration, kind of a guiding light for how they want to live. And we like to think about them as what you're standing for in life, descriptions of how you want your life to look. And then we kind of compare it to what they're not, because as behavior analysts, we kind of like provide examples and non-examples. So you really get a clear definition of the values. So they're not goals or outcomes, right? The goals are going to come later on, and they're not an end result to be achieved. So it's not something we're going to check off. We're not going to say that these values are done. They're going to be that guiding light that's always going to be there to inspire us as we make decisions to work towards our goals. So the next, not the next slide, sorry, the right side of this slide.
Oops.
Oops, sorry, you can go back. Yeah, sorry. So the page on the right here is, this page is actually taken from something that I've done with caregivers or staff. So the wording would be a little bit adjusted if we were working with the client themselves. But so this is to get kind of the, juices flowing about thinking about how they want to show up. So what are you about? When you wake up, when you start your day, when you walk into work, we want to ask ourselves, how do I want to show up today? Whether you're a caregiver, as a staff person, a supportive individual, whoever you are showing up in this individual's life, what do I want my work to say about me? So the phrase that we're going to use is, when I am blank, I feel good about who I am at work, right? I'm being who I want to be, and therefore my decisions throughout the day, the week, the year, the month, this season at work, I'm going to feel good about my decisions because I know that I am making them in alignment with the person that I want to be at work. So this phrase, when I am blank, I feel good about who I am at work, is what we're going to work on the next slide. And again, that wording could just be adjusted to be, if we're looking at ourselves, if we're talking about the client, it may be, how do I want to show up as a friend? How do I want to show up as a housemate? How do I want to show up as a son, a daughter, a sister, brother, any kind of role that they have in life? How do they want to show up as that? You can go ahead and go to the next slide now. So these are the two next pages in this exercise that I like to complete. And this is kind of a list of some example values. It's not exhaustive by any means. It's kind of to get people thinking about some descriptive words they can use as their values, their guiding values. And so we give this list and recommend they read through it and see which words really resonate with them. So which adjectives jump out and say, like, yes, this is really meaningful to me. Now, all of these values, all of these words on this list, they're all positive, right? They all sound really good. No one's going to say, I don't want to be that, but it's really to see which resonates with you as the individual, the client, the staff person, the caregiver, whoever it is. We want them to pick out 1, 2, 3, a couple words that really jump out to them. And that's going to be what they're using to fill in that sentence about, when I'm being a, compassionate staff person, I'm feeling good about, my role at work. So at the bottom there, we have kind of, a tip just to jot these down, like in a notes app or on Post-its, or sticking it anywhere that you can have this visual reminder of, like, this is who I'm striving to be. Because the more we align our goals with what is important to us, the more likely we're going to engage in the behavior to actually achieve those goals, because they're going to be in alignment with actually who we're trying to be. And then that last page there on the right, talking about practice. So again, this is in a couple page handout that we complete with staff or individuals. So it's just talking about a little bit of a homework practice over the next days at work or in whatever environment they are in, picking the values that they're just identified and thinking about them across the next days. But how you can insert those values, those words, into the choices that you're facing, whether they're big or small across your next days, whether you're at work with the individual or on your own, or if you are the client, how can you use those words to make your decisions? So for example, when you're deciding how to respond to a coworker, when you're figuring out how to show up for a client, if you are a staff person, taking note of how you feel when you're considering that value, and then how do you feel compared to when you're not mindful at all about what was leading your decisions at work. So when we show up, we want to have the knowledge of what is important to us in mind when we're going forwards. So those decisions, we can be confident about the decisions. That's really our goal. You can go to the next slide.
And thank you, Kristen, this is fabulous, and I believe you can make it to the end, but you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I got one more slide. That is good. Okay. Or one more real good slide. Okay. So now that we have an idea of what's really important to our clients, then we focus on developing the goals and programs for them that match up to what their life looks like. So what they've described, how can we actually put that into action? So these are just a couple examples. They're really not specific to any client. They sound pretty general. And so we would individualize them and get them a little bit more specific to that client's current skill set, of course. But these are just some examples. Let's say someone chose, like a client chose, they really cared about being creative. So maybe we align their goals and programming to make sure that they have access to art classes or craft materials, or we increase communication requests and abilities to engage in those preferred creative outlets. Same thing for being responsible. Let's say that was really important to them. Maybe they wanted to increase some independence in, financial literacy or other self-care activities. Again, getting back to communication skills, anything that's going to make them feel responsible. And then the last one is more aligned with a staff person's example. So maybe a staff person said, oh, it's really important for me to be attentive when I'm at work. And so some goals of theirs may be aligned with increasing engagement with their clients during preferred activities or demonstrating proactive strategies that they can do through maybe daily activity planning. So if the goal, again, is aligned with the value, it's going to be much more likely to be achieved or worked on. And these can be very specific. These are kind of high level example goal wordings, but they can definitely be highly individualized. That last slide, I'm just leaving with a favorite quote of mine about, if you don't decide what your life is about, it defaults to what you spend your days doing. So again, the importance of identifying what is important to us, so then we spend our days doing something in alignment with that. The last slide just has my contact information, but that wraps up my talk.
Thank you very much, Kristen. That's all new to me and just fabulous information. And we really appreciate you taking some time to help us understand this today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, next we have Ginny. I'm gonna unpin Kristen. How do I do that? Stop spotlighting her, and then I'm going to start spotlighting Ginny. And Ginny, I have a slide that I'm going to share with you. Ooh, that's it, Kristen, you're done. I just have to open it up. So Ginny, while I'm opening up your slide, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. I'm just going to go ahead and start by introducing myself. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and giving up your time. These are all really important and fun topics to talk about, maybe not fun for everybody. So my name is Ginny Conroy. I am the founder of Social Grace, named after my two favorite things, my love for social learning and my daughter, Grace. Let's see, almost 8 years ago, I was on maternity leave after having my first daughter, and I was on leave from Arlington Public Schools. I used to be a department chair of special education at a great high school here in Arlington, and I used to run a program formerly known as, it was originally called the Asperger's program, and then changed to the secondary program for students with autism, and absolutely loved my time in the public school system. When I was home on maternity leave, I just really felt like there was, I had that love for social learning. I wanted to definitely spend more time with my daughter, Grace. I didn't know what I was really getting myself into, but I also, in running the secondary program for students with autism, I really felt like we really needed more creative services to address social, emotional, and executive function development. So I kind of took a leap of faith 8 years ago and started a small coaching practice and really had no idea what was in store. So today, fast forward, we have 18 staff members and we provide coaching and support services specializing in social and executive function. We are also a vendor for DARS and providing community support services. Actually, one of my most favorite things that I do is run a free parent support group, and we've been doing it, every month for the last 7, almost 8 years. It is free to anybody in the community who has, a child with developmental disability, and especially we have a lot of families who are experiencing that cliff, or feeling like they're experiencing that cliff after high school, and just supporting anybody who needs it. I feel that Social Grace really is a practice that I wish I had growing up in Arlington County. I grew up with a father who is very mentally ill. And my youngest brother, Russell, is 37, and he has Down syndrome and autism. And then I have another brother with significant social anxieties and another brother with ADHD. So as you can imagine, I grew up in lots of chaos. So this has really been a vocation for me, and just to support families in all of the aspects that I wish that my family had growing up. So I just thought we could also get moving a little bit, and if you would like to turn on your camera, you may, but you don't have to. But Sherry, I'm going to use you as an example. I just want everyone to put everything down out of their hand before I talk a little bit more about social and executive function coaching and therapy. And I would love it if you could, Sherry, can you show me 6 inches apart with your hands? And everybody else, even if you have your camera off, I'm going to assume that you are doing this little activity with me. Okay, 6 inches, great. And then when I say go, I just want you to clasp your hands together like this. Can you do that? Go ahead. Okay. How's that feel?
A little bit self-conscious, but okay.
Sorry, a little self-conscious, kind of comfy. I have a question, Sherry. Are you a right thumber or are you a left thumber? Which thumb keeps going on top?
Right.
Your right thumb? Oh, wow. I am a left thumber. Interesting. And anybody else who's on? I guess nobody else is on camera, but I want you to pay attention. If you are a right thumber, which thumb is on top? So for me, I'm a left thumber. Sherry is a right thumber. Nothing against right thumbers. There's no right or wrong answer in this activity. Okay, so Sherry, go ahead and put your hands 6 inches apart. And then hopefully everyone else is doing this. And when I say go, I want you to now, Sherry is now going to be a left thumber, and I'm now going to be a right thumber. So if you were a left thumber, you are now going to be a right thumber. And if you were a right thumber, I want you to now be a left thumber. When I say go, are you ready? Go. How does that feel, Sherry? And how does that feel, everybody? How does that feel?
Not good.
Not good, right? Yeah, and you can, if you can, oh, there's Donna Budway. Donna, how did that feel for you?
Not good.
Not good. Uncomfortable, right? Uncomfortable, awkward, weird. I know some people, adults that I have done this with, the other day I was giving a presentation and this one adult was like, I can't do it. And then my question is, do you think that if you did that 100 times with the opposite thumb, that you would make you feel a little bit more comfortable? Maybe. What do you think, Donna? Sherry? A little bit? Maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah, possibly. So that is just a fun little activity, and just to get our blood moving a little bit during this presentation. And if you didn't do it with everyone with your camera off, go ahead and try it now. But anyways, when I ask you to switch sides with your thumb, it is uncomfortable, it's awkward, it's weird, because our brains are perfectly wired the way they are to keep us comfortable, right? It's really comfortable for me to go like this 100 times. It's really comfortable. But when I have to switch thumbs, I don't even, it's not comfortable for me. It's just not. So our brains are wired with patterns, right? And then oftentimes I, work with so many individuals and have over the years where educators, teachers, coaches, or even, in the workplace, employers will just ask the adults that I work with to just stop what they're doing and, do something else. And I'm like, oh, well, that's really uncomfortable, right? When somebody is so used to doing something and they have to do something differently, and switch directions, or even just stop what they're doing. It's uncomfortable, it's weird, it's awkward. It's not easy. It's really not easy for any of us. All of us are wired differently. So that is one of the fun things that we do at Social Grace is we meet clients where they are, and we talk a lot about the brain and how our brains are wired, right? So we have the downstairs part of our brain. I'm going to use my thumb down here. It's our fight or flight. And then we have the upstairs part of our brain right here. I'm going to use this part of my hand to show this. And this, I stole this from Dr. Dan Siegel, who's amazing. And he wrote a book called The Whole Brain Child. But anyway, so we talk a lot about how our brain hardwired for patterns, and the downstairs part of our brain, our fight or flight, whenever that alert system goes off, we need tools and strategies to turn it down, or to help us regulate or stay safe or calm, or problem solve. So at Social Grace, we talk a lot about how the social world, whenever you're sharing space with others, is the social world, as you know, is messy and complicated, not just for the clients we work with, for me included. Every single one of us, the social world is messy and complicated, but guess what? We have tools and strategies. So at Social Grace, we talk a lot about the brain. We we talk a lot about social competencies, and social competencies are the skills and abilities to navigate social interactions effectively, understand social cues, and engage in meaningful relationships. And so we address social awareness, communication, relationship building, emotional regulation, social problem solving, and then as far as executive functions, planning and organizing, working memory, cognitive flexibility, metacognition, thinking about thinking. So we cannot teach social and work on social competencies unless we also address executive function. They go hand in hand. So we do a lot of social and executive function and just education on the upstairs and downstairs part of our brain. And my goal for every single client that comes in the door at Social Grace is to learn how their brain is wired and then developing tools to help them be successful, setting achievable and actionable goals, and actually working with a coach or therapist to meet their goals. Let's see, am I leaving anything out? I think that's pretty much it. My goal is anybody who comes to us, we work with them on becoming a professional problem solver. I don't care what problem is thrown at you. We have tools and strategies to problem solve, and sometimes a strategy is asking for help. Well, we have to practice asking for help or knowing who to ask for help if we need it. We do a lot of community. We are out in the community. We are doing travel training with our adults. When we have clients that come to us, we will meet them. We talk a lot about, what goals they want. A goal is anything you think about doing, right? And sometimes we need a coach or somebody who can build a relationship with us, really spend that time to get to know each other and then work together to achieve those goals. I had a young adult come and meet with me yesterday, and he really struggles with social and executive function. And autism is, I was talking with the family about, they were getting so frustrated with him, and like, he knows what to do. He knows all these things. And I was like, listen, the disability is not that he doesn't know what to do. He knows what to do. It's that doing what he knows how to do. That's his disability. And finally, there was like a light bulb that went off. And the more you do it, really, it's really uncomfortable when you try to do things differently. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And then the more we can develop positive, solutions and find creative strategies. So I guess one of the things that at Social Grace we're known for are creative strategies, meeting individuals where they are, meeting here at our office and going out in the community to become social detectives and work on developing our social competencies. When clients come to us, we don't say, hey, today we are going to teach you social skills. No, we just go do it. And then we do a lot of modeling. We run a camp in the summer called Get Out of the House Camp. It is like an adventure camp where we take the metro, we go to restaurants, we eat really delicious food, we go kayaking, and we are just in the real world. So we teach in the real world and provide real life opportunities and experiences. And I truly feel like so many of the individuals I work with just need experiences and opportunities. So we have groups, we have meetups, we do a lot of community support. I work with so many teens and young adults that really need to get out of their heads. They need to do things for other people. Sometimes, when you're volunteering and helping somebody else, you forget about, those, you're not ruminating on all the things that you were, thinking about, and you're out of the house and you're getting your blood moving. And we talk a lot about that holistic piece. So I am a junkie for going to, conferences. Thank you, Donna Budway, for getting me addicted to the Achieving Optimal Health Conference and really meeting so many incredible doctors and therapists from all over the country who work with adults of all abilities to achieve optimal health. So in order to do that, what do we need to do? There's so many pieces to this puzzle of health and nutrition and social learning, and then making mistakes in social situations and then learning from those mistakes. That's the goal. So we provide a lot of experiences and opportunities for learning and then just connection. I tell everyone this, I still feel like we're just getting started at Social Grace because there are so many services that I see that I just want to help create and work on. So that is a little bit of us in a nutshell.
And you have about 3 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about social skills training for work. I know that you are supporting DARs and people who work at Enabled Intelligence. And
Thank you
what are those? I guess I call them soft skills, the skills you need to be able to get and keep a job.
Yeah, I call them social competencies, and understanding how the world works and how you can work within the world. I have lots of tips and tricks and ideas, and really I've kind of made up a lot of my own things over the years, but then I use a lot of social thinking as well, and it's just depending on the individual. But we kind of just go out, and then we meet with our client and then develop the goals, and not our goals for them. It's what are their goals, and we try to make sure that they're achievable and realistic. Thank you for bringing up Enabled Intelligence. I almost forgot. I am on the board of advisors for an amazing company in our area called Enabled Intelligence, and they are dedicated to hiring neurodiverse individuals to annotate artificial intelligence. I didn't know anything about artificial intelligence until a few years ago, and now I know more than I ever wanted to know about artificial intelligence and data annotation. But we are a feeder for Enabled Intelligence, and we work with such amazing, brilliant individuals who need really great jobs, and it is a wonderful company. And then we do provide occupational therapy and support as needed for the team over at Enabled Intelligence and/or employees that are there too. So that is a great company. I highly recommend, if anybody knows an adult looking for a job, to go ahead and go on enabledintelligence.net. The application is about a minute. It is very easy to fill out and just get in the pipeline. They offer great benefits. It is an amazing office, a great work culture. They have quiet rooms. They have so much support. So I highly recommend Enabled Intelligence.
Great. Thank you very, very much for your time. And I'm going to move on to Allie. Allie is going to talk about reactive behavioral strategies, and she is with Patterson Behavioral Services. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pin Allie.
Right. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Sherry.
Oh, Allie, wait, you're gonna do this on your screen, is that right?
Oh, I hit the present button. Is it working?
Okay, you're good. You're very good. Okay. Yep.
Can't see it on my screen, but oh, there we go. Now I do. All right. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to be talking about how to prioritize safety and efficacy in reactive strategies. So really, I'm picking up where Kristen left off with her talk about proactive strategies. So I'm going to give you some advice for dealing with minor challenging behaviors that might come up for you, as well as some information about how to get more help if you need that. So just a little bit about me. My name is Allie Patterson. I'm licensed as a behavior analyst in Virginia, and I'm also a board certified behavior analyst at the doctoral level, BCBAD. And that means that I work with people who have challenges related to learning, social skills, communication. And I worked with a really wide range of people, including toddlers, students in general education, kids of all ages, adults with intellectual disability, people with severe problem behavior. So I take a behavioral approach, but I also have this background in developmental psychology. And I think that the combination of those two things, developmental psychology and behavior analysis, gives a really good plan for how to react. All right, so I've got a little agenda of our topics. So I'm going to tell you a little bit, just a brief overview about consequences of behavior. And so the way that a BCBA like me uses the word consequence is different from like our regular vernacular. So consequence to a behavior analyst just means whatever happens after a behavior. So that could be good, that could be bad, that could be neutral. So consequence, I want to emphasize, does not mean punishment. It's just whatever happens right after the behavior of interest. So then I'll also tell you a little bit about a few myths about reactive strategies, and then teach you some of the basics about how to use strategies in a way that is both effective and safe. So our presentation with Kristen, that was about antecedent strategies, proactive strategies. So you really should be using those as much as possible to prevent challenging behavior, especially if you're working with or caring for adults. As you might know, challenging behaviors can become extremely dangerous and we need to prevent them. But of course, sometimes, no matter what we do, the behavior is going to happen. So a behavior plan should include all those great proactive strategies from Kristen's presentation, but we also need a plan for how to react. And so the plan for how to react comes entirely from what we call the function of the behavior. So basically, all behavior serves a function. All behavior gets something for the person who is behaving. But sometimes this is tricky because sometimes it's getting the person something we can't necessarily observe, like maybe sensory stimulation or relief from their anxiety or something like that. But as LaVoice mentioned, more often than not, challenging behavior exists to communicate something and to get their wants and needs met, sometimes by another person. So we can understand why a behavior is occurring by looking at three things: what comes before the behavior, that's the antecedent; what the behavior looks like, that's just called the behavior; and then what comes after the behavior, which is called the consequence. And so the antecedent gives us a clue about whether or not the behavior will produce some kind of reinforcement. And the behavior tells us specifically what the behavior looks like. And then the consequence is what happens after a behavior is performed. And we could get a lot more into this, but I think in the interest of time, we'll just move on ahead to ABC data collection. So this is an example of a data sheet that can help you figure out the antecedent and the consequence of a challenging behavior. So in my example here, let's say you work with someone named Sam, and Sam is known to have what people call a meltdown. So as a behavior analyst, we want to know, what exactly is a meltdown? What does that look like? Because people use that word to mean different things for different people. So in this case, it might be throwing things, screaming, grabbing, but we want to know what happened right before. And so that's what, when you're recording your data, you would put that in that third column there. So let's say Sam was playing games on the tablet next to his teacher. The teacher noticed that the tablet's battery was about to die. And so just trying to help, the teacher took the tablet to charge it and offered Sam a book to read instead. So that's the antecedent. That's what happened right before. And then you would want to record exactly what happened. For example, maybe Sam threw the book, maybe he yelled and grabbed the tablet out of her hands. And then here's the next column is the consequence. So perhaps the teacher said, "I just wanted to charge it for you. I'm sorry, I was trying to help." And so she feels bad, she gives the tablet back, and then she sits there with Sam while he plays his favorite game. So these next two columns are really important for figuring out what you should do about that. And you would do this with the help of a professional within therapeutic consultation. So we want to know, what did Sam gain or avoid? We always gain or avoid something with our behavior. So in this case, he gained access to the tablet, he got it back, he gained access to that game, he gained the teacher's attention, her comfort, her apology, and he avoided reading that book that was offered to him. Which, those are all fine things to want. I mean, I want many of those things as well. But the issue is, often we need to teach the people that we care for, that we work with, different ways, pro-social ways to get what they want instead. So really any sort of communication would have done in this scenario. So no matter how Sam communicates, helping him learn, be it with an AAC, signing, talking, whatever it is, to give some indication that he's all done with some non-preferred direction, to point or speak, to get access to the things he wants, and also to get access to people's attention, to have someone play with him, which of course is something that we all want. Okay, so what we just talked about is established scientific facts. So we do the things that get us what we want and need. All of our behavior, everyone's behavior, is changed or maintained by its consequences. But there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I think knowing about this information is helpful as you create with your consultant a behavior plan. So the background on this slide is M&Ms, because there is this popular and very incorrect perception of behavior interventions. And that myth is that we just kind of hand out M&Ms for good behavior, take away M&Ms for bad behavior, and then it's that simplistic. When of course, it is not. So one of the first myths I like to talk about is that all teaching, some people believe, should be age appropriate. But instead, I'd really want you to consider the person you're working with or caring for, their baseline ability, to be respectful of their starting place. So for example, even if you're working with an adult, if this adult needs prompting to say single words, we don't want to require her to use full sentences to get what she wants. That could result in a lot of frustration, could result in some dangerous behavior. And similar, even if an adult can't sit through dinner conversation, you wouldn't want to bring her to a formal 3-hour dinner party and expect it to go well. We want to be respectful of current abilities and build on those slowly. The next is about intrinsic motivation. And really that's just another way to say that a behavior happens without any other person's encouragement. But again, good habits really have to be built up, usually by reinforcing with attention or maybe some further away reward like good grades or a paycheck. And the process of building these habits is harder and slower for people who have learning challenges. So again, we really want to consider that developmental level. We want to consider the baseline ability. Not everyone enjoys their schoolwork or vocational training without outside motivation right away. Like, I'm certain that many of us wouldn't show up for work if we didn't get a paycheck. That's just life. And then a final myth here is that bribery and reinforcement are the same thing. So it's true that a bribe could be reinforcing, but we would have to analyze the situation closely, and take some of that ABC data that I showed you on the last slide. We'd have to analyze it to be sure. So in short, bribery is offering something, hoping to get your desired behavior in return, and reinforcement is in response to desired behavior. So let me show you this next slide. So here's a little illustration of that scenario. So on the left, the child here is totally in control. He's having a tantrum, so his mom is bribing him with ice cream. She's saying, I'll give this to you if you calm down. You just need to calm down. Here, take this, be quiet. And so once he gets this ice cream, he probably will calm down, but it's not doing him any favors in the long term. He's not learned how to get what he wants appropriately. Instead, he's learned a behavior that will probably make people want to keep away from him. But remember that reinforcement is always happening, so whether you want it to or not. In the bribe example, the behavior being reinforced was the tantrum. So the child is likely to tantrum again in the future. But on the right, in this example of positive reinforcement, the mom is in control here. She has some specific criteria for how this kid can earn his ice cream, maybe by asking calmly, asking nicely. He gets that ice cream only after he has met the criteria. And this way, the child has learned to be polite and friendly to get what he wants, which is a skill that will make other people want to be around him. So reinforcement is how behavior strengthens, whether you plan for it or not. You cannot avoid reinforcement. So we always just want to make sure we are reinforcing the right behaviors. Okay. So all that brings me to what you can do when you see a challenging behavior. So remember, we want to spend most of our time and effort preventing behavior using the strategies that Kristen showed us. But some level of challenging behavior will always exist, so we do need a plan to respond to it. So my first point here is to be aware of what we call an extinction burst. So I've got this great vending machine metaphor that some of you may have heard before, but I like to tell it because it's a powerful visual. So the story here is to imagine that you've worked in the same office building for about 5 years. So every day for 5 years, you go to the vending machine on your floor, you put in your quarters, you push the button, and you get a Coke. You've done this routine every single day for 5 years. But one day, you walk to the machine, you put in your money, you push the button, and nothing comes out. What do you do? So if you're like me, or really like most of us, you wouldn't just immediately accept that this behavior that has always worked for you to get your Coke doesn't work and will never work again. You're not just going to walk away from the machine. Instead, you will probably get a little bit emotional. You might curse, you might hit the buttons, you might slap the side of the machine, even kick it. In fact, several people in the US each year get so emotional during this exact scenario that they topple the vending machine and seriously injure or kill themselves. And that is called an extinction burst. So when a source of reinforcement is suddenly removed, we don't just accept that our behavior doesn't work anymore. We become emotional, and this can be dangerous. So if you're working with someone who is emotional, you want to do your best to remain calm and still and quiet. In general, you don't want to touch, block, crowd, or give direction to someone who's agitated. If the person elopes, if they run away from you, you want to follow them calmly to make sure they keep safe, and you don't want to let any dangerous objects get in their way or let any untrained or emotional person escalate the situation. And if you're able to give the person what they want, do it. If there is no immediate danger, you could even prompt the person to communicate in order to get what they want. For example, with a vending machine, like let's say the distributor came by as you're having your little episode, you're slapping the machine. Let's say the distributor said, "Why don't you just ask me for a Coke?" If you asked for the Coke and you got it, the danger would be gone. You would not curse or kick anymore. You would probably just go back to your desk and drink your Coke in peace. So the next few slides, if we have time for them. How are we on time, Jerry?
7.5 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. So these next few slides, I'm going to talk about what to do to teach skills. So I'm not talking about a crisis here. If you are in a crisis, do whatever you need to do to keep everyone safe. Follow your crisis plan. A person in a crisis is not available for learning, and trying to force learning can be really, really dangerous. So remember that reinforcement turns a behavior off. Being given that Coke is going to make you stop slapping the machine and kicking it. So sometimes that is what you need to do to keep everyone safe.
So Ellie, your screen stopped sharing.
Oh, uh-oh. One second.
I can pick up if you like.
Sure. I can't see it on. I might have to come log off and come.
I'll pick up where you left off. This one? Ellie? Tom, did we lose Ellie?
I'm back. It
froze
on my end too.
Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we might be one previous to that. Yeah, one before that. Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about so reinforcing a challenging behavior will make it stop in the short term. And if you're in a crisis, that might be the best option, and your therapeutic consultant can help you with the plan and in determining that. But the issue with that is that you've taught a person that challenging behavior is how to get their needs met, which means they will continue to do it. And a lot of our clients and the people we care for, they might have a really hard time using their communication skills to get needs met. So when they find something that works, it does tend to stick. So if you find yourself stuck in this kind of cycle, it's probably best to seek some professional help. And those services, of course, are offered under the waiver, under therapeutic consultation. And you may also have access to them under ABA as part of your health insurance benefits. Okay, next slide, please. So I would encourage you, if you're struggling with these, to seek help sooner rather than later. So disruptive or dangerous behaviors, in my opinion, require help from a professional. They require a behavior intervention plan because using an incorrect intervention can make things worse. So you really want a professional to help you through this if you're struggling. And these assessments usually include a functional assessment, which means that your consultant will help you figure out the function of the behavior. So what that helps the person you're working with or caring for, what it helps them get or avoid. And you can also assist with this process by collecting a little ABC data, like on the slide I showed you earlier. And I've got, at the end of this presentation, I've got some resources that includes my ABC data sheet. And so your consultant would also interview important people like family members, caregivers, staff members, teachers, anybody who's important in the daily life, and also do some observations and maybe even a standardized assessment. And so once all of that's been done, your consultant works with you to create a behavior plan that has both proactive, again, that's what Kristen covered, and then reactive, when I'm covering strategies. And we'll also help you collect data to make sure the plan is working or see if it needs to be changed. Next slide. Thanks. So in general, the process after you've got this plan in hand is called shaping behavior. So we start with our client's baseline ability, and we provide reinforcement as they get closer and closer to that target goal. So for one example of a behavior that can be shaped is getting out of something. So we might work with someone who gets out of things by flipping a table and yelling, "I'm done." We shape it so that they're still able to get what they want. We want people to get what they want and what they need. That's our main goal. But we want to do it in a way that is going to allow them to have access to all the different settings, similar to what Jenny was describing with the values. We want our clients to be able to participate in settings where they can, that align with their values, that give them meaningful things to do with their everyday life. Okay, next slide, please. So just some general tips when you're shaping behavior. So giving out random rewards and prizes will not necessarily cause any behaviors to increase. You have to be pretty thoughtful and systematic in order to increase the behaviors you want more of and decrease the ones that you don't want. But the easiest and the cheapest and often the best reinforcer is your complete and undivided attention in the form of immediate and specific feedback. So that means when you see the behavior that you want repeated, you tell the person exactly what they did right, and you tell them right away. So for example, if you see your child check on their classmate who tripped and fell, you would immediately walk over and say, "Thanks for helping him up. You're such a great friend." And for most people, this will cause that helping behavior to increase, meaning that your child will be more likely to help again the next time they see a friend in need. So let's skip on over to the next one. Yeah. So just like Kristen and just like Jenny, we really want to see each person develop the communication skills, the tolerance skills to get their needs met and to live a productive and safe and fun life. So as you are thinking about your therapeutic consultation intervention or any other behavioral intervention you might receive, keep these big goals in mind while you're judging the efficacy. So some questions I like to ask myself and my clients is, during this plan, did anyone get hurt? Did we maintain our rapport with the person we're working with? Do we have data to show lasting change over time? Not just did this temporarily stop the behavior in the moment, but over time, are we working toward progress? And then the last point is something that often gets overlooked. But let's say I've written the most perfect behavior plan, and it would totally work if only it was implemented correctly. That doesn't matter if it's not something that the caregivers and the people working with this person on an everyday basis, if it's not something that they can maintain, that they can implement, then it's not a good plan, and we would need to make some changes.
Well, you have a couple of minutes left. I don't know how fast you want me to.
Oh, yes,
review.
I am. This is the last slide, and then I was just going to show some resources. So good timing. Yeah, so really there's just, there's no often people come to me looking for a shortcut. And unfortunately, there often is not a shortcut. We do have to be patient and we have to be consistent in implementing our plan. But I assure you that the payoffs in terms of quality of life are well worth the effort. Okay, so this final section, I just got some resources. The first is where to find help. So I know Medicaid has a database of providers, but I also like this provider directory from the Virginia Association for Applied Behavior Analysis. It allows you to filter by location, by insurance plan, by if people accept the waivers or not. And there's lots of good information on there. And then there's also this consulting group called FTF Behavioral Consulting. And they are very helpful for people dealing with severe problem behavior. So meaning especially dangerous problem behavior. So if you're struggling with that, this would be a great resource for you. The next one is some specific quick reference guide for responding to challenging behavior. Just a little overview. I won't go through each one. The next is an ABC data collection sheet, similar to what I showed you earlier. And then finally, these are some books and a video that I found really helpful. ABA Visualized is a really great illustrated guide to some of the basic strategies. The middle is a video about challenges, taking a behavioral approach to treating sleep problems, which I know that a lot of the people we work with and care for struggle with sleep. And then the final is some myths and facts about ABA from Kennedy Krieger. And then finally is my contact information. So I love to talk about this stuff. I'm always happy to talk with a parent or a caregiver or staff member. So feel free to get in touch if I can help you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was terrifically informative and very quick. I didn't think you'd be able to get through the whole slide deck. So our final presenter is Pamela Kuhl from Grafton, who's going to present on trauma and ABA. And Pamela, you have a group there, and I don't know if you wanted to present your own slides or whether you wanted me to push the slides.
Hi, this is Pam. Yes, the BCBA's Tyler and Amanda will be the primary presenters.
You could, if you have a slide, yeah, would you be able to present them for us?
Sure.
Well, while she's getting that set up, I'll give like a brief what Grafton is in a nutshell, and then we'll kind of go through the presentation from there. So Grafton is an organization focused on supporting individuals and their families with disabilities and other behavioral health challenges. We do this over the lifespan, so we have through different programs and regions. We have early intervention services. We have some student community-based services here in Winchester, Virginia, as well as in Richmond. We have a psychiatric residential treatment facilities. We have one of those in Berryville. We also have a newer one up in Minnesota. And then we serve the adult population by having community-based in Winchester and Richmond regions as well. Grafton is the parent organization of the year, which focuses on being trauma-informed and is a restraint and seclusion-free crisis management system. That's currently being utilized in over 44 states, I believe, and has been in 3 different countries. But for me, so I'm Tyler Long. I'm a BCBA. I've been certified for just about 2 years, and I realized earlier today that today was my 15 years in the field, to the day. Yeah.
I'm Amanda Jean-Baptiste. I'm also a BCBA here at Grafton. I've been a BCBA for about 4 years and in the field for about 8.
And then can you go on to the next slide, please? And this is our core belief. We believe that people inherently want to do well, and those with disabilities or trauma is no exception. When we see an individual struggling, it is our responsibility to try to figure out why and teach the skills that are necessary. This is something that we truly believe, not only for our the kiddos and the clients that we serve, but also for our staff and parents and other caregivers as well. We really believe that everyone just wants to have a good day. You do have to understand that some things might happen along the way that that might create some difficult situations, but so that's why it's important for us to try to figure out the why. And this is something that I've seen at our organization from like every level, from the upper levels of top management all the way down and throughout. Next slide. So just our objectives, we're gonna talk briefly just what trauma is, what a trauma-informed approach looks like. We're gonna go over some key elements and some features of our trauma-informed program. And then we're going to talk about how we incorporate those into an ABA setting, and then we're going to go over some basic behavior principles. We already talked about some of them already this evening. And then we're going to talk about how we incorporate all these practices while maintaining a trauma-informed mindset. Next slide. Sorry. So first we have to try figure out what trauma is. And it's the experience, just read this slide, it's the experience of violence and victimization, including abuse, sexual abuse, severe neglect, and or loss, or it's also the witnessing of these violence, terrorism, or disasters. And I think we would all agree that all of these events are traumatic. But next slide. But there's also some, we have to take into consideration that there also may be some other events that may cause trauma. And, these are what we call the multi-traumas. A lot of these, they have like a strong impact at first, but they might fade over time. But however, that's not always the case for everyone, especially if there's multiple events or if they're repeated over time. So a lot of the kiddos that we see, like inability to communicate is a big one that we see. Multiple placements, medical interventions that can be pretty traumatic as well. So these are all the little things that we also include that might be the little T traumas. Next slide. So what is a trauma-informed approach? It's the appreciation of the high prevalence of traumatic experiences in persons who receive services for developmental, behavioral, mental health needs. And it's just making sure you have a thorough understanding of profound neurological, biological, psychological, and social effects of trauma and violence on the individuals. And then we're going to talk about the 4 R's throughout our program, throughout our presentation tonight. We want to talk about like the realization of the widespread impact that trauma has. We're going to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma. Then what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to put this knowledge into our policy and procedures? And we're going to talk briefly about how one way that we can resist re-traumatization. Next slide. And then, some key features and principles of trauma-informed program is we want to make sure that we're focusing on safety, and that's both physical and emotional. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing the trust and making appropriate boundaries and choice. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing the person's choice. Make sure that providing choice whenever possible throughout the day. We're going to talk about collaboration. Sharing power. Like, we want to work with the individuals, not against them. They really just want to empower that individual and make them feel supported. Next slide.
So first, we want to realize the impact that trauma has on our population. So 70% of adults in the U.S., this is individuals that do not have disabilities. It includes individuals with disabilities and without disabilities, have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. There's an even higher risk of trauma in the individuals that we serve, as well as those who serve. Therefore, we must utilize universal precautions and assume a history of traumatic stress that may impact current functioning in practice. So we use these universal precautions. We treat everyone as if they've experienced some sort of trauma in their lives. Next slide, please. So we also, the second R is recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma. Here are a full list of them: dissociation, flashbacks, nightmares, self-injury, eating problems, aggression, depression. How many of these look familiar to you guys? I'm sure you've seen quite a few of these in your field. Next slide, please. The first job that we have before we go into dealing with a person with challenging behavior is we want to calm the amygdala. They talked a little bit about this earlier, about identifying possible triggers first, identifying early warning signs, those precursor behaviors that we might see, such as pacing or clenching our jaws or tightening our hands. Identify calming strategies, whether that's a blanket or a stress ball or things like that, that we can calm before we actually go into a full behavior. And we also want to build rapport, so build a relationship with the individual. You can follow behavior intervention plan as much as you want to the letter, but if you don't have a relationship in place, it might not be as effective. Next slide, please. Our second job is to build new neural pathways. Jenny talked about this a little bit earlier with how uncomfortable it was to change back and forth with our neural pathways. So we want to identify skills and behaviors that can help individuals manage trauma response in a new way. We want to teach skills during neutral situations, not during a crisis. Once we get to a boiling point, it's no use teaching. Nothing's going to kind of go in. And we want to use a behavior plan during a crisis. We move on to the next slide. So we lead into our third R, which is responding, putting knowledge into practice. So applied behavior analysis as a trauma-informed approach is defined as a treatment model that is systematically applied to improve socially significant behavior by understanding the value-altering neurological, biological, psychological, and social variables that affect behavior change. Next slide.
All right, in this part, we kind of talked about it earlier with other presentations, but so I'll just go pretty quickly. So what is behavior? You know, it's anything that a lot of times when people talk about behaviors, it's mainly just the negative ones, but behavior is anything that is observable or measurable that is done by a living organism. Could be things like walking, writing your name, destroying property, washing your hands. We consider all of these things to be behaviors, not just the negative ones as well. The next slide. And then so when you look at topography, when a lot of people they realize they learn what I do, I'm a behavior analyst. They're like, oh, well, so and so they're hitting their sibling all day, or so and so is headbanging. What do we do? I just look at them. I tell them I don't know. Because from you telling me what the behavior looks like, that doesn't tell me why the behavior is occurring in that way. So we have to look at the function of the behavior. So we have to try to find the source of reinforcement that is maintaining that behavior. Next slide. In our field, there's 4 main functions of behavior. There's the attention. It's they want to gain access. They want to get attention. This could be either positive or negative. From someone, it's tangible. They want something. They want an item or an activity, or they're trying to get away from something. And then there's also a sensory need that is being met by engaging in behavior. But obviously, we must remember that all behavior is a form of communication, and that it happens for a reason. And when when individuals are behaving in a certain way, we have to understand that they're trying to communicate something to us. A lot of times behaviors, we try to fit them in these little boxes, but oftentimes what we see out in the field is that you're gonna check off 2 or 3 boxes at one time, just with one behavior. So we have to understand the power of all these functions of behavior happening at the same time. So a lot of times the learner might want to escape a demand, or they might want to escape a task, but they're not just escaping, go do nothing. They want to escape to go, maybe play with a toy or something, or engage in some sort of activity with a peer, or maybe their parents, mom or dad. So there's an attention component to that as well. Next slide. And then kind of I think we've already seen this earlier a couple times today with the Boys and Allie's presentations. But to help determine the function of the behavior, we're going to do a functional behavior assessment. There's different ways we do this. We do indirect methods. We use ratings, checklists, some open-ended interviews with parents, teachers, caregivers. or even sometimes the client themselves if it's appropriate. We do this by we really get to learn about the child, but we don't stop there. There's also some other methods, testing, and some sort of assessments, observations, and the ABC recording. Next slide. So here's another ABC form. It's a little different from what Ali had earlier, but it's kind of this is just a little bit easier. It's just a checkbox. And I always caution people, we don't always just only use ABC data, that's your only way you're collecting information. Because if you look at me, especially this time of year, every time I sneeze, someone says bless you, and you write, follow me around with this little form, you're gonna think it's attention based, but no, it's just because I'm suffering from allergies and pollen, for this time of year. So, next slide.
We also want to talk about the key features of a trauma-informed ABA program, which are the key features of a trauma-informed program. This is how we use it in ABA. So safety, everyone needs to feel safe. When individuals are experiencing that fight, flight, or freeze of their amygdala firing, they're unable to work in their forebrain, which is responsible for learning, problem solving, and impulse control. And they're operating more so within their mid or hindbrain, which is responsible for heartbeat, respiration, motor movement. That's why those kinds of things speed up at the time. We want to understand the effects of trauma in the brain. We want to promote a safe environment physically and emotionally. We want to look at comfort versus control, which is a collaborative approach where we are being kind and compassionate. We're working with them, not against them. We do set boundaries and expectations, but we keep how and why we set those boundaries in mind. We use Ikero blocking techniques instead of utilizing restraint or seclusion. Next slide. We want to look at trustworthiness. We want to build that rapport that we talked about earlier. So building a relationship with the individual. Oftentimes you can have the best interventions and strategies, but if you don't have a relationship, then you won't have the same results as someone else who does. You also can become the conditioned fun person by creating joy, going to learn and have fun, or have fun not knowing that you're learning. We want to use clear language, task analyses, visuals, and social stories. We also want to exhaust all reinforcement procedures before attempting punishment procedures. Next slide. We want to look at choice, so conduct frequent preference assessments. When you need to say no, we do say no in our ABA programs. We have to say no in life. But we want to provide alternative choices. So we can't go swimming today, but we can read a book or watch TV. Those are some things that they might like to do. Or we can tell the individual when they can do the activity. So we can go to swimming tomorrow when it's not raining. We also allow our individuals to choose what they would like to work for, choose the order of their schedule, choose the activities they would like to complete for their session, those kinds of things. Next slide, please. Collaboration, we work with the individuals, not against them. We let the client express their needs, their goals. We gain consent from their families and assent from the individuals. We frequently monitor assent from the individual, making sure that they're still wanting to be learning what we're teaching. We also collaborate with related service providers. Here at Grafton, we do have access to speech pathologists, occupational therapy, music therapists, mental health professionals, teachers, families, outside services that they may have. So we collaborate as much as possible. Next slide, please. We also want to teach empowerment. So we teach functional communication skills. We understand here that all behavior is communication. We look at those functions of behavior to see what their behaviors are communicating. We show the individual that their behavior is meaningful and they don't have to escalate into more severe problem behaviors. And we start reintroducing the hard stuff after we start teaching that communication. Next slide, please. We want to talk a little bit about the fourth R, which is resisting re-traumatization. The way that we do that here is we focus on Ikero blocking techniques, or Ikero, it's a broader term, not just blocking techniques, versus physical restraint. So Ikero typically will take more time per incident at first, but that usually decreases after time. We provide the opportunity to use new skills the person has learned, where physical restraint keeps the control in the staff's hands. With using eukaryote, injuries are generally less severe. Bruises are typically what we see. With physical restraint, there's a greater risk and range of injury from bruising to death. And with eukaryote, relationship with a person is preserved and is often actually reinforced. With physical restraint, relationship is damaged and requires additional time to work to restore. Being physically restrained can be traumatic for someone, and it's also traumatic for the person doing the restraint. Next slide, please. Here's a few resources that we have. You can find out more information about us as a whole or our sister companies in Ontario. Any questions for us tonight?
Wow, you did that in 15, a little bit more than 15 minutes. You're awesome.
We tried our best getting in about 15 minutes, so I think we did pretty good.
Wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing. And LaVoice, I don't know if you're still here or not.
Yes, I'm still here. I've
Okay.
been listening. This has been very helpful, fascinating.
So, LaVoice, first I'd like a couple of comments from you, and then there was a question in the chat that if there were a couple of questions in the chat. Well, I'll let you close, LaVoice, but the first question that I had, and you folks know about it, LaVoice, I think you're probably the best person to answer, is that if there's an emergency, we see a behavior that's either dangerous to us or the person that's demonstrating the behavior, what is our first response supposed to be? Do we call 911?
I think one, it depends on what you're observing and sort of case by case. I don't want to say jump to calling 911 across the board, generally speaking, because it depends on what you're actually seeing. I would say that if you are in a situation where the individual is at imminent risk of harm to self or others, I would err on the side, generally speaking, to say calling 911. But that's when you're looking at an imminent response. For individuals with developmental disabilities, particularly those on the autism spectrum, we want to be careful and mindful, particularly as we listen to the last presentation from Grafton, of not creating new trauma for people, because for some, calling the police can create trauma. And that can, from that stems a whole host of other behaviors. But I would certainly still err on the side that when you recognize that there is imminent risk of harm to the person, the individual themselves or someone else, err on the side of calling 911. Other options certainly include reaching out to our emergency services with Arlington County, 703-228-5160. And if someone, Maimuna, if you can actually put that in the chat room for the contact information for emergency services, and I'll update my presentation to include that as well. And I've updating it for the reach, and I'll also include that 800 number as well, because that's also an option, is to call reach directly. They will respond. Their response time is required to be within a 2-hour window, and often they will respond sooner than that if there's a situation in terms of them coming out to support. But they will also support you by phone as well. Even if they are making their way out, they're going to support you by phone with the crisis response as well. So that's another option as well. I also encourage, when we're looking at developing therapeutic consultation, plans, that should be a part of your plan, is when you're trying X, Y, and Z and it's not working or it doesn't work, what should you actually do? So that for each individual what that threshold is, that baseline when you should call 911, at least discussing it. For most of the individuals that we support, we're not getting to that point where we're looking at calling 911. We're typically doing those other responses beforehand, before we get to that point. So hopefully that answers that question, Sherry. I will say
along
also,
with the safety plans that along with
Oh,
the safety
definitely, along with the
plans.
safety plan. And REACH will also support, particularly if we're getting to the point where we have someone that we support that does require that response, of 911. We want to still try to prevent and minimize that so that if it happened once, let's try to minimize that from happening a second time and a third time. And so part of what REACH will do is to create and develop a crisis support plan um, unique to that individual to try to minimize whatever those risk factors are. You've heard a lot of talk today about antecedents, as well as going to look at and addressing those antecedents as well, to try to get a different behavior and a different outcome for the behavior as well.
Great. The second question from Carol Skelly is she signed off, but of course this is going to be recorded. And she's talking about the relationship between the mental health therapist and behavioral specialist working as a team. She says that she believes the data shows many clients and most individuals with autism have a co-occurring developmental disability and a mental health condition. So when we are receiving or when we do need mental health services, as you showed in the slide, that there is a mental health condition, how do the therapists work together?
Right, that's a really important comment question. In fact, I was actually looking at some data just now and updating my own PowerPoint when I send that out. So we know that 1 in 3 individuals with developmental disabilities experiences mental health issues, things such as major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder that we've heard from Grafton as well. And so another thing that we also experience is something called diagnostic overshadowing, where often professionals, most often we probably see this in more medical doctors, but some other professionals or even laymen, where we were attribute what we're seeing just to the behavior, to the actual developmental disability, or something is attributed to, autism, for example, when really there's an underlying mental health disorder. And I'm not sure which of our presenters actually spoke to this, but when we are not really treating the underlying root cause and we think that we're doing treating one thing solely as a behavioral issue, but there's an underlying mental health issue, we actually run the risk of doing more harm than good. So again, I really can underscore the importance of communicating and sharing information with your support coordinator, and reaching out to other, members of our team. I happen to be a licensed clinical social worker. Lauren Townsend, who is on our staff, is a licensed professional counselor. She's also a board certified behavior analyst. And we have Jim Kuhagen, who is a licensed clinical psychologist. And then, of course, our DD mental health therapist. So we've got a great deal of expertise on our team when it comes to mental health and behavioral supports, to be able to really tease out and try to decipher in making sure that we're getting the right services. And so to Carol's point and her question, it is important to have that collaboration where the mental health side is working in collaboration with behavioral supports, because you want to also ensure that the therapist is not doing something that might be counterindicated where the behavior supports is concerned, and vice versa. So that communication is important. But where part of that communication comes from is the support coordinator, who is sort of central, is making sure that he or she is communicating with the therapist, also with the behavior supports, and ensuring that that communication actually happens, and so that the information is exchanged, at that level where where support coordination is concerned. But there should still be some periodic communications between the therapist, and behavioral supports professionals, even if that occurs in interdisciplinary team meetings, annual planning meetings, that at some point in the course of treatment on both parts, there should be some direct communication and sharing of information. I happen to actually supervise the DD mental health therapist position within developmental services, and do work to ensure that that does happen regularly.
Thank you, LaVoice. I've learned so much from everybody, and I'm going I'm going to remind you that the first Tuesday of the month is our regular Developmental Disabilities Committee. We'll be meeting in July, but not in August, and then we'll start up again in September. If folks have ideas for other topics to cover for Listen and Learn, just let us know. And LaVoice, I'm going to let you close.
Well, and I want to thank all of our presenters. We reached out to several of you, excuse me, and you all were so quick to respond. And so we are so appreciative for that and the information that you have provided. And this will go well beyond individuals that have, are able to participate on this call. As Sherry mentioned, this has been recorded today. And so we look forward to sending it out. It'll go out to well over, 200-300 individuals through our listserv. So you are helping people beyond those that you see on the screen here today. And so we cannot thank you enough for your presentations today. Our support coordinators will also be listening to this information. I'm actually going to make this particular Listen and Learn mandatory reviewing for all of our support coordinators, because you guys have just provided a wealth of information, and we want to make sure that it's getting shared with the with individuals that are also receiving active support coordination, enhanced support coordination as well. So again, we thank you also on behalf of our Deputy Director for DHS and our CSB Executive Director, Deborah Warren, who is not able to be here. I do extend gratitudes on behalf of her as well. Maimuna, I will let any closing comments from you, my fearless leader, our fearless leader.
Thank you, LaVoice, and thank you to everyone. Sherry, the DD committee. This was a vital topic, probably going to be one of our favorites that goes into our recordings. And I cannot thank all of the panel members enough for sharing your expertise. As LaVoice mentioned, you are not only reaching the audience that is here this evening, but it's going to be a wider audience that you're reaching, because we can then share this information over and over again. I unfortunately am not able to put the emergency services that we have in the chat. My chat feature is not working for some reason, but what I'll do is I'll share the link with Sherry, and so that could be a part of our follow-up that we share with all of you. But thank you so very much for your evening, and I'm sure everybody got something out of it new that they didn't have before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maimuna. And I'll put that number in the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, with other emergency services. Thank you so much, everyone. And we will send out the combined PowerPoint for this session. And we really appreciate your participation and your interest. Thank you so much. And Tom, you can stop recording.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.